Yeah, man. And it's me again for episode number, whatever episode this is. I actually lost count, actually. I've lost count into how many episodes there are of season 2. Because I want to stop season 2 at like 10 episodes as well. And then either take a little break to figure some things out, but like also post during this break when I post on serious content, technically. And then switch things out and see how that goes and experiment a little bit more and whatnot. But anyways, we're back. As you can tell, I am very tired, or at least I hope you can tell that I'm very tired. I was partying the entire night, and I woke up at like 6, I went to bed at like 6 and woke up at like 10, 11, whatever. Yeah, I woke up at 10. Anyways, and I was like, so the morning I gotta prepare for a trip, and I gotta dip in a bit, but it is what it is. I'm back, and before we get into the business of the day, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the Spotify page, the Apple Podcast page, the Google Podcast page. Just subscribe everywhere. Put on your notification bells, leave a review, leave a comment, just do whatever. And also follow the socials at Faculty Class Show on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And follow me personally at Dami_the_creator on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Now, let's get jiggy with it. So what's gonna happen is, I don't know if this is either the last episode or the next episode, but like I recorded an episode yesterday, which was supposed to be this I recorded an episode wanting to talk about what I'm about to talk about, but then I ended up going like on another entire tangent randomly, just like because I mentioned TikTok and then it reminded me of something, and and that was also a good enough topic, and I was like, fuck it, actually let me just rant about the situation because it's getting out of hand. I'm not gonna give spoilers. I mean, it doesn't really matter much, I think, but if just in case I do decide to post this one first, I don't know. I guess it is what it is. But essentially, what I want to talk about is the concepts and the topic of reparations, because it's been in the news, at least in this point in time. I don't know when this episode's gonna come out, but like it's been in the news recently because of because the Guyanese president is gonna give a speech at the UN about reparations, and he got interviewed by a British news channel and whatnot. But here's something, and it reminded me of like a conversation that I wanted to have, but like there's a lot of conversations I want to have on this podcast, but it's like I want to have them with people that probably know better than me, because I'm a numbers nigga. So it's like I want to talk to like people, but it's like it's difficult finding people that are willing to do it for free. Which, fair enough, get your bread, chase that bag, and not a woman or a man, but chase that bag, get that money. So I hear it. I hear the fact that people want to get paid to like be on a podcast or any podcast, especially since like I'm a big podcast. It's like good brand improvement for them. But that's besides the point. So essentially there's a lot of conversations that I do want to have, just haven't had the opportunity of having them. But like I think I'm gonna slowly start blending them into my solo episodes, because why not? Like actually, why not? I can also have the conversation again at a later date. Like a podcast doesn't have to only have one distinct, unique topic per episode. But essentially the reparations. So like I hope you all know reparations are, but just in case you don't or whatever, reparations is basically like the whole idea that countries, for instance, colonial powers, past colonial powers were really never stop. But anyways, it's the concept that colonial powers and people who partook in colonization and slavery and things like that, it's a concept that they pay back the gains that they made, or or technically speaking, the things that they stole from people and from countries and from our ancestors essentially. And reparations does apply to uh, other fields as well. It applies to different areas. But when reparations is used the most, it's mostly used in the concept of colonization and slavery, and it's the idea that like yeah, colonial powers and colonial families pay back the debt, which it is a debt. It's a debt. Pay back the debts to the countries in which they enslaved and the people that they enslaved as well. Just in case some people don't live in the countries, you know, like African Americans, they deserve reparations. You know, people from the Caribbean definitely deserve reparations, and African countries as well deserve reparations. Now, what exactly I will talk about what I actually want to talk about on the topic of reparations is how whenever the conversation comes up, especially with white people, there are always so many questions as to why it is that people deserve to get reparations, and one of the key points that they love pointing out is the fact that slavery and colonization happened, well, slavery at the very least happened years and years and years ago. Colonization is actually very much still recent. Like some countries are barely 60 years old in terms of like when they gained independence from colonial powers. But like you see, that's another thing. We like to pretend like these things are so far removed when they're really not. Like there are people still alive who experienced colonialism. There are people alive who still experienced segregation. Well, not still experience, but there are people still alive who experience segregation in the US and apartheid in South Africa. Like there's a lot of people still very much alive who experience, who were there in the thick of the discrimination. So it's like black people asking for reparations isn't a thing of like, oh yeah, let's go back so many years ago. It wasn't that many years ago. It's very much quite recent. And one thing that white people like to bring up a lot in the conversation of reparations is how like why should they pay, like why should they theoretic the taxpayer, like why should they as an individual pay for the sins of their ancestors that are like generations away. And whenever they make that argument, what pops up in my head, I mind my business. You know, I don't always say that. I don't say that loud. I mind my business. But what pops in my head is the fact that they think they should not pay for the sins of their ancestors is an exclamation. It's pretty much them saying that we deserve to suffer along with our ancestors, because yeah, all of this happened yet okay, it's not us immediately, it's not us and you who are in the thick of it, but we cannot pretend like the effects of slavery, colonization, segregation and all of that are not very much still present in black communities in African countries. African countries are barely just starting to heal from all of that nonsense. So Caribbean countries and African Americans are going through it like like a motherfucker. So it's like, let's be for real. Like, okay, you saying you don't want to give reparations because it's the sins of your ancestors is pretty much the same as you saying that the sufferings of black people are very much justified or are none of your concern because it's not you who directly was involved in it. But it's like, that doesn't make any sense now, does it? Because it doesn't sound very human now, does it? Because you're essentially condemning an entire race of people to suffering and to pain. Because it's not like people are saying, okay, give all of your money to us. Like, that's not what we're saying. We're just saying, give us the equivalent of the labor that our ancestors did, the equivalent of the resources that your country stole from us. And we like to pretend like people are not capable of, like, y'all are very much capable of doing that shit. Because countries, European countries, would spend so much money on military and weapons and shit like that. But then, and the citizens as well would just do this, cover their eyes. I see no evil, so there is no evil, isn't it? cover their eyes and act blind to this, but then feel very much offended by the fact that there is a conversation happening about how tax money should also go into paying for reparations. Like, let's not pretend like y'all didn't steal from us. And also, you guys have an abundance of people who actually are very much millionaires and billionaires and so rich because of the bad and evil things that were done to black people. The royal family, for instance, how do y'all think that they have so many palaces? How do you think they have so much money and gold and jewels and shit like that? They stole all of it. All of it is the efforts of slaves. It's all the efforts of people of, people of color, so black people. And we like to pretend like it's not. Even let's even start off a little bit lighter on the spectrum of reparation. Museums, the British Museum, for example. A crazy fact is, even a crazier fact. Let's look at this. So, so Africa as a continent has a certain amount of artifacts, of artworks, of things that pretty much are part of the culture of wherever it is that these things came from. And there's an X amount of all of these that exist, yeah. Like a certain number of artifacts exist that came out of the continent of Africa, a certain number. Only about 5 to 10% of this number of artifacts, only about 5 to 10% of this is in Africa. Only, being generous, I would say 10%. Only 10% is in Africa. The rest, the 90% of what is essentially African culture, or like the cultures of different African countries and tribes and people, 90% of all of that is in European and American civilization. It is stuck in museums of people who essentially stole it from the continent. And another crazy fact is, let's take the UK for example, the British Museum. The British Museum has a certain percentage of all of our shit. But only 1% of the things that the British Museum has is actually on display. So 99% of the things that the British stole from Africa is stuck in a warehouse somewhere. It's just in storage, collecting dust. And they refuse to give it back because, oh, this are spoils of war. And then they would say shit like, we do acknowledge that the things that our ancestors did were bad and evil, but that doesn't mean we need to pay you back. And it's like, how can you acknowledge that what happened is evil and that you do benefit from that evil? Then isn't your refusal to correct that evil, isn't that also inherently evil? Like, your rejection of responsibility and your acceptance of benefits is an act of aggression, is an act of violence towards the victims and the descendants of the victims, who are victims because the lack of resources and wealth, which should have been passed down from our ancestors to us, is in your pockets. Those resources that are supposed to be ours are in your pockets, and your refusal to return them is an act of greed and an act of violence, because you're condemning an entire people towards needing to work more than they are supposed to, while you work a lot less than you're supposed to. And that's the lightest in the light. Actually, no, that's not even as light as we can get on the topic of reparation. I think personally the lightest we can get when it comes to reparations is just the abolishment of racism. Like, let's fully take that out of the equation. Let's have a system that is not racist. Let's have a system that's not rooted in black oppression. Let's even just start there, and even that alone is difficult. Like, there's always, and what kills me the most is, especially when it comes to white people, is that when it comes to anti-blackness and racism towards black people, there's always so much confusion. There's always so many questions. There's always like, oh, but what about this? What about that? What about those? There's always so many questions, so many counter arguments. But then when it comes to the topics of anti-Semitism, they all of a sudden fully understand the entirety of discrimination and they have no questions and they become the biggest defenders. And that's okay. Like, it should be like that. Like, discrimination is wrong in any shape, way, or form. But it just goes to show that white people don't necessarily view black people as human beings because we're so much far removed from whiteness. Because of our skin color, like we're so much far removed from whiteness. And they consider humanity to be your proximity to whiteness. And that's why they have so much empathy and sympathy for Jewish people, because there is such a proximity towards them. And I just think that is absolutely crazy, and just goes to show how a lot of people like just barely just a lot of people are just bare performative to begin with. Like the whole like, oh yeah, let's help Africa out, let's help people of color out, let's do this, let's do that. It's all just for show. It's also they can convince themselves that they are good people when in fact they are not remotely good in any way. It's just an act to satiate their conscience. It's just pretending. It's just an act. It's just fake. And I just find that very, well, not interesting really. Like, it's not like, this is so interesting. It's pretty much just is what it is. And that's why I personally just I don't take shit for like face value. I'm always questioning. It's like, get comfortable with being uncomfortable around me, because I would bring things up to you that you maybe don't want to think about. So even I don't think white people are actually even ignorant. I don't think white people are ignorant. I feel like white people feign ignorance, and they weaponize ignorance to just not claim responsibility and accountability. Because I know that they do know. They do know and they do understand completely and fully, especially when it comes to people who have proximity to whiteness. Yeah, it's just that, and I think that's actually where I'm gonna stop this episode. Oh shit, it's shorter than I thought. But anyways, yeah, I'm gonna stop it here. Food for thought. Think about reparations, and think about your, to the white people especially. Think about your contributions towards racism and why it is that you seem to not understand racism against black people, but then when it comes to other groups of people, such as Jewish people who have proximity to whiteness, you then all of a sudden have no questions and you fully understand anti-Semitism, and like you're fully in support of it, and you never question anything that is labeled as anti-Semitic, but as soon as something is labeled as racist towards black people, you pretty much say and pretty much think that black people are weaponizing racism. Because I even think about why it is that why do you think why do you think black people are able to weaponize racism? We don't, but like, why do you think that? Because to weaponize something, that thing needs to exist. So it's like, if black people are able to weaponize racism, then doesn't that mean racism exists? And isn't that the root of all problems? Well, think about it. And with that being said, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. Review, like, comment, interact, follow the socials at the Equity Class Show, and follow me personally at Dami_the_creator. And with that being said, I think that's that for that. And I'll see you guys again on the next episode. And by the way, if you ever thought at any point in this episode, oh, he looks like trash, you're racist. You're racist, just had to say that. But yeah, with that being said, I will catch y'all on the next episode. And like always, I love you and thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for being a part of this. And I hope you have a great weekend and a great week and a great whatever it is, whenever it is that I do post this. And I'll see you guys. Bye. Ah, yeah. Fui yo.